You're listening to the Educate, Enable and Empower Show, a podcast from the Scottish Women's Development Forum, in which we sit down with inspiring women and others to listen to their stories, life lessons and perspectives. My name is Jenny Stewart, and I'm chair of the Scottish Women's Development Forum. In this podcast, Joanne McEwen and I sit down with the Chief Constable of Police Scotland, Jo Farrell. Chief Constable Farrell has overall command and responsibility for 22,000 officers and staff, serving communities across a third of the United Kingdom's landmass. Welcome to Breaking Barriers, a special episode in honour of International Women's Day, where we're embracing the theme of inspiring inclusion. Today, we are joined by a trailblazer in policing within the United Kingdom, Chief Constable Jo Farrell, who is the first woman to lead Police Scotland. Chief Constable Farrell started out her journey in the police as a constable in Cambridge in 1991. In 2002, she joined Northumbria Police, initially as a Chief Inspector, and was promoted to Assistant Chief Constable with responsibility for response and neighbourhood policing, as well as the Communications Department. She joined Durham Constabulary in November 2016 as Deputy Chief Constable before being appointed Chief Constable in June 2019. And in October 2023, she entered office as Chief Constable at Police Scotland. Chief Constable Farrell, it's an honour to have you with us.
Thank you. Good morning. I'll just start by saying how privileged I feel and honoured to be leading this organisation. Police Scotland is a fantastic police service, fabulous people, and very grateful for the way in which I've been welcomed into the organisation in October of last year. I am working my way around the country, but I realise now the enormity of it. But I've been hugely impressed both by the passion and enthusiasm that people have for policing. And, every day you meet a hero in policing, and we can't possibly identify all those people. But I know there is a heroic work going on across the country every single day, every single moment. And that's why people ring us when there is nobody else to go to. So important that I say that to start with.
Of course. And so back then in 1991, when you joined, and of course SWDF focused on women and equality for women in policing, must have been quite a different time then and huge progress. But what was it like back then?
I always wanted to be a police officer. I come from a background of a mum who was a nurse for more than 40 years. So had that public sector motivation, which sounds a bit grandiose. But, can we do something good and positive for people? Absolutely. But also both my parents worked shifts. So working shifts, working weekends, working through the night was something I was really familiar with. I like the order of policing. I like the structure of it. And, very, very, very passionate about us making a real difference to people's lives. And I always say to new recruits, never underestimate the impact, the positive impact you can have on people. I say that more broadly. Never underestimate the positive impact we have on people, because people don't contact us to tell us they're having a nice day. They contact us in crisis. They contact us at the lowest point. And when we deliver policing well, you are heroes. You are heroes, and we can really make a difference. So motivated around the mission. I also like being in teams. And not a fabulous sports person, but like the idea of being in a team. And when I joined in the early 90s, there was a big recruitment drive in policing across England and Wales. I'm not certain. I don't know whether it was the same across the legacy forces. Probably was. So you were joining at a time when actually the numbers of women in policing were increasing. We were on cycles of 5-week patterns of new recruits coming in. It was really exciting. In a team, fabulous people, and just really absolutely loved it. And I've got a few friends, but one particular friend that we joined. We were actually on different shifts, and she was slightly ahead of me. And 32 and a half years later, we're still friends. And again, we'll all have those experiences. We'll all have those experiences because we've met, haven't we? And we've worked in those tight teams, and we've seen and we see things that not many other people see. People in crisis, people at their lowest ebb, and some of the, most vile individuals and dangerous individuals across society. I think it bonds people.
Yeah, I think it's one we've spoken about before. It's one of the great strengths in policing, I think, is the team. And it's in the friendships, I think, that you make. What about role models then? So you mentioned your mum, a nurse, your dad, that public sector motivation. Were they significant role models, or did you have role models in the police that you looked up to?
So I don't, there's no policing in our family. Maybe not role model from a gender point of view, but I was really fortunate, and it speaks to, where we are equally today. When I joined, my sergeants, they all happened to be men. They were all really good. They were very encouraging, quite far-ranging in the sense that one of them was on, was it called Fast Track back in the day, or High Potential? I can't remember what the scheme was, but he was a high flyer. So, hopefully he saw a little bit in me in terms of some potential. But then the other sergeants were really encouraging. And sometimes we get very focused, don't we, where we let people down. But I can say in the early 90s, my initial experience of policing was a really positive one. They were really encouraging. A couple of them had, 20-something years service. But I suppose the broader point to pull out at this stage is to say how important our first-line supervisors are. Who always sort of make or break a situation in the sense of encouraging, welcoming. They were very, slightly different style of leadership to now, very direct. But in the same way as you remember good teachers that we have as kids, I can name them now. It was back in the day of the local control rooms.
Yeah.
So they were very influential in those early few years in terms of, come on, you can push yourself.
And I know, I think that early experience can be so pivotal,
Yes.
can't it, for people in terms of how that shapes their future. And it's interesting, you said your sergeant can identify potential in you. Well, of course he did. And I just wonder, for those of our members who are listening, reaching the level that you've reaching that executive level, that can seem, to many people, I would say, something quite unobtainable. Do you always think you would make it there? Or
No, I certainly joined the service, wanting to advance through the service. I always say to people, if you're motivated to do that, brilliant, but probably not a good idea to say it to your tutor on the first day or the first week, or so keep that one slightly under the radar. I got a good bit of advice when I'd finished at school. You're too young to join the police at 18. I'm not saying that's necessarily true, but that was the advice I was given. If you can get a degree that would serve you well in the future. That's what I did, and not a particularly good one, from a business studies degree from Sheffield Polytechnic. For those people who are old enough to know what Polytechnic is, but did that, and I almost joined. So I almost joined South Yorkshire Police. Went to an open evening that was hosted by South Yorkshire Police. And came out, it was on an evening time, came out, stood in the bus stop, waiting for the bus to go back. And it was raining just for a change because we were in South Yorkshire. And I thought, I can't join here. It's terrible, the weather. So went back to where my parents live and joined Cambridgeshire. And because there was so much recruitment during those early 90s, you could pick, and the process was very quick. So I always had an eye on, I want to advance, I want to push myself. But how important those sergeants are. But yeah, good advice around getting a degree. But I'm not hugely academic.
It's a good thing in education that we see now is so many different routes, and policing is actually one of those jobs that you can come from any background. I think that's the beauty of it. So Thinking about that journey then and that ambition, what about failure and setbacks? Because we all have them. Sure, you've had them.
Yeah.
What's your approach or advice to those who might be listening in terms of overcoming that?
So I think going into any, interview, board, selection, exam, prepare yourself for being unsuccessful. And I suppose the mark of all of us is how we deal with the disappointment, isn't it? I think that's the sort of strand there. And, I've been unsuccessful a number of times. There's a couple of occasions when, to become a superintendent, in my heart of hearts, I knew I wasn't ready. But I sort of forged on regardless. Well, that was a bit foolish, a bit silly, and actually. So I think there's a piece about being self-reflective. There's a piece about, honesty with yourself and seeking advice from people, but being content if they say, not this time, not yet, it's not a personal affront, because these roles are so important, and we have an obligation to the public to select the people who can do them and have enough self-awareness of our own to know when really we're not quite there. And there's been a couple of times. So superintendent was one. And then there's been other times, if we're being generous, I was unsuccessful. And if we're being not, I failed, depending on terminology you want to use. And, sometimes that's about a time and a place and the timing being right, and the skills you bring is what the job and the role needs at the time. And they can be slightly different at different times. And a mix in a team, and that becomes more relevant in that chief officer executive level. You've got to fit in the team at a time and a place, and the skills that you bring, and they're not always fixed. They move, and not with this role, but in senior roles in England and Wales, it has the influence of politicians in it as well.
Of course, and it's interesting to hear you say that about timing, circumstances. Mm-hmm. And I know for a lot of officers, staff, there's that consideration about their own readiness, but also where they are in their life as well, because that can have an impact. Yeah. And I just wonder, the perception, I think, widely would be that the bigger the job is, the more space that takes up. There's less time for your own life, and that question of work-life balance. How have you managed that as you've gone further in your career?
That sometimes it's been challenging. We'll all have felt that. It doesn't come at a senior rank. It's across the whole of our professional careers, isn't it? And inevitably, early on in any new rank, you feel that more acutely as you settle down, and you get a sense of it's. In that space, it's that working out what's urgent and what's important. And I think in more senior roles, you almost have to be really disciplined around, don't get drawn into the urgent all the time, because it's the important. And I think the important is the broader planning, which sounds really boring stuff, but, what's the direction of the force? How do we make sure we've got the right investment? What are the capabilities we need to build for the future? How do we create that and continually to work in that, creating an inclusive and welcoming culture and environment? They're the biggies, aren't they? It starts with the leadership and the culture, and then it moves to the operational, not in the here and now of things. For me, it's, what's the direction, what's the performance of the force? Are we continually improving? Are we delivering that better service? How do we do that? How do we shape our work? How do we shape our workforce? I'm really keen that we draw and build capability to meet the threat and risk for the future, whether that's in the cyber fraud. We've done a lot of that already, but that's where it's evolving, and crimes move from place and people to cross boundaries and more broad, and we need to be able to adapt in that space.
It's interesting that urgent and important,
yes,
because there's so many things that are urgent in policing. So I guess by doing that then and taking that approach in work, that allows you to have that good balance that's important. Yeah.
But also being content and with around what you delegate. What are the things that I need to have sight of, and what am I happy for other people to do, empowering those people.
And sitting alongside that, our strategy, our plans and all of this, our values. We are a values-based organisation. When it comes to values and your personal values, why are they important and how do you reflect them as an individual?
Policing and the decisions we make, it's not always clear what the right answer is. We're often dealing in the greyness, aren't we? Now, whether that's as a frontline new police officer or whether it's as the Chief Constable, sometimes the answer isn't really clear. And we have all sorts of tools to do that in the operational space. We'll use the national decision-making model. We'll use that in a strategic space as well. But what runs obviously alongside and through that is those values, and actually what's the right thing? What's the right thing? What is the right thing to do? Instinctively, sometimes very easy to know what the right thing to do. Other times, the right answer is, like I say, in that grey space. Some of it comes with experience. Some of it comes with having good people around you who can advise you and who are willing to disagree. But we come back to, don't we, what's the right thing to do? What would the public expect us to do? And that speaks to integrity. It speaks to fairness. It speaks to inclusion. It speaks to what does it look like when it's on the front of the newspapers? What would the man, woman, individual person that was serving in the community, what would they think about the judgment and the decision that we'd made?
It's interesting you say about disagreement. I think that is so important. We talk about different perspectives. I actively invite it, and I know it's something that you've talked about that you do as well. But how do you navigate situations where your values may be in conflict with others? So not a disagreement, and it's a healthy perspective. How would you navigate that?
I think that's quite nuanced because we work in the public sector. We don't spend our days with people who lack integrity per se, or are unfair. But that broader point around people feeling included, we do look through the lens of our backgrounds, of our history, of how we're brought up, of our experiences. And with the Your Leadership Matters, some of the work we've done there and some of the examples that we've used, haven't we, to say actually some of our custom and practice and our policy and our procedure, we have built that traditionally based on the eyes and the lens of white men, because that's the history. That's where we've come. White men. So let's look through the lens of what that looks like. If you're a woman, we're talking International Women's Day, but other diverse groups. And so the values piece is not that we butt up against people who have different values, but I think it's probably a bit more nuanced of our backgrounds, and we can, to your point of the challenge, to say, well, what about looking at it through the lens of somebody else and having that challenge and being able to, ultimately we might disagree, mightn't we? And there's some really good examples on the Your Leadership Matters training around design of things, everyday objects that have been designed through the lens of white men. And I think that's really powerful, isn't it? Because that's not, I'm deliberately having a bias. It's that unconscious bias. It's
fascinating. And the SWDF have pushed for that very thing, talking about body armour and all of these things. I know there's been studies out with policing talking about, crash testing in cars that are all developed from men. So really, really fascinating. And just on that point, moving to sort of transforming our organisational culture. Let's set the scene for our listeners, some of whom may not be from Scotland or indeed the UK. Police Scotland is, of course, the second largest police force in the UK, formed over a decade ago. It was the merging of 8 regional forces with over 22,000 officers and staff. Now, in May last year, our former Chief Constable, Sir Ian Livingston, made a statement to the Scottish Police Authority Board whereby he said, "It is the right thing for me to do as Chief Constable to clearly state that institutional racism, sexism, misogyny and discrimination exist. Police Scotland is institutionally racist and discriminatory." Now, the Scottish Women's Development Forum welcomed Sir Ian's announcement because for us it was a step forward in addressing those barriers, the systems that we were talking about, and challenges that impact our members, both past and present. It really has set the foundation for us to build a better and more inclusive future in policing. So I've got a bit of a 2-part question for you here, Chief. At that time, you were Chief Constable in Durham. What did you think of the announcement by Sir Ian? And now, institutional discrimination. What's important to you taking this forward as the Chief Constable of Police Scotland?
So at the time, I thought that was a very bold and brave. I don't know whether Sir Ian would say would agree with me in the brave. You know, there's brave and there's brave, isn't there? Brave is protecting vulnerable people and against violent people. That's brave is on that front line. But brave from a big organisation, public sector organisation, serving the public. First to do that in Scotland. First to do that across policing in the United Kingdom. So brave in that sense. And for every person that agreed, there would be somebody who disagreed. For every person who said, that is my experience in Police Scotland, there would be somebody who say, no, that wasn't my experience. But I've just come up from the BME forum, and I'll answer it by repeating what I've said to them this morning. Having done that, this organisation is now in a unique position in that the conversations are so different to the ones that have been had elsewhere. We're not dancing on the pinhead of definitions. We are listening to people's lived experience. We're acknowledging that we haven't always served the public fairly. We are acknowledging that some of our colleagues haven't felt as though they've always been treated fairly. Now, that is not to say that of the vast amount of work that we do and the calls that come in every day, 99.9% of the time, we'll get it right. We'll get it right, and we do a tremendous job. And the threat and risk we're managing and the diversity and the complex needs, we're really, we should never forget that. Really good at it. But we can always be better. And people have lived experience, and I've been part of a Truth to Power session with SEMPA. And, some people's lived experience in the organisation, toe-curlingly awful. So there is always room for improvement. In answer to the big question, it's opened up the conversation. Now, I think from May till now, we have embarked on a lot of work and a lot of activity, which is really positive. We won't see big changes. You won't see step changes overnight. This will be a continual and, work that we need to keep working away at. But I would like to shift us away from analysing the problem and really get focused around the activity. And then we'll take a sense check. Then we'll take a view, whether that's through Truth to Power sessions, whether that's through surveys of the public and our people, and then we'll go again. That's how I see it. But going back over the issue, I think we've done that bit. I think we've done that bit. Now we move on with the action. Others will disagree. Others will disagree. But we've got a lot of evidence base, haven't we already? People's individual experiences, HMICS culture report, different things tell us. They point us in the same direction. So, and it's the so what question. And the work we're doing, and are we able to say, and that's the impact of it.
And it's interesting you touched upon some might not agree with that label. What would you say to them?
Come to the Truth to Power sessions.
And you're right. I was at that one yesterday, and they're powerful. They are. Absolutely. And I absolutely agree. I think the SWDF, we absolutely agree with you that this is a journey that will take time, and it won't be without challenges, I don't think, as we go through that journey. But if we think about activity, as you mentioned, there will be occasions, we know, when people who are in this organisation already or who want to join this organisation demonstrate values and behaviours that don't fit with Police Scotland or our vision for the future. So how important is it for you as part of that activity to challenge those individuals?
Yeah, absolutely. Can I just, as we remember as we're talking, I'll come back to well-being. So very, very important. We employ 22,000 people. There will be, I'll use the word corruption in the broader sense. There will be people who are corrupt, who don't display the behaviours, the values of the organisation, and they need to be identified and exited quickly from the organisation appropriately within the law. But they need to be exited quickly. I think that within that you have, part of the cultural piece is to recognise when we can work with somebody and support them and it be more of a reflective learning, and when there are, quite frankly, those individuals who probably should never be in policing. And like I say, we exit them very quickly, appropriately, but very, very quickly from the organisation. And it's a huge group of people, so we will get those people. And the quality of the way and the speed at which we do that is something that is important to me, and we shouldn't shy away from it. I would go as far as if some, I'll answer the question I'm about to pose myself. Jo, are you certain you haven't got a David Carrick in your ranks? No, I'm not certain we haven't got our David Carrick. That's not to say that we haven't been working hard, but we are generating, aren't we? And we're driving a culture where people can call out issues and behaviours of concern. And that's a confident workforce who can do that, whether, through a confidential line, and that's one route, or going to a supervisor, or a supervisor witnesses it. But we have to be alert to people like that. Have to be alert. We can't shy away. We can't shy away from it. We're a product of society, and we can't shy away, and we just need to. And it starts. I'll come back to my wellbeing point because it links to. So I talk wellbeing as a priority, and part of wellbeing is having an inclusive culture and having good leadership. So people are well led, supported by their supervisors. This is why the sergeant rank is so important. And when we've listened to truth to power, at some occasions we've thought, why didn't the supervisor feel that they could intervene or take some positive action in that space? But we need to give those people doing very challenging roles the confidence, the skills, our support in calling out bad behaviour and being confident to know what to do with it. Is this a learning issue? Is this person somebody we can learn with and learn and support, or is this something more serious?
Yeah, the approach matters, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It really does. And I think that's a lot of, you talked about your leadership matters, empowering line managers to know how to deal with things at the right level and the best possible way. I think, listening to you speak there, some of our members who will be listening, no doubt, to this podcast, they will have experienced difficulties. They may have experienced discrimination. What would be your message to them?
My message would be, I hope that they would feel confident to call that out. Now, whether that's going to a supervisor, a line manager, whether it's through confidential reporting, through the network, through this network, seek advice and support through colleague. This is the absolute strength, isn't it, of the network? It connects people working across the whole of the country, and whether you use that network in a, you know, around maybe a professional issue. They're all professional issues, but a professional issue in terms of serving the public, or a professional issue of concern that you've got in terms of your treatment. That's the power. And often it's easier to take advice from somebody who's maybe working at a different location, bit of distance from where you are. You can get a perspective and get good advice. So really, really powerful being able to reach out. Because we know, don't we, at locations, maybe more urban locations, you've got probably a significant number of female officers and staff, so the options. But in some of our rural locations, it's maybe not always as easy to find somebody that you'd be able to reach out to actually within that same location.
And I think very much the space SWDF is in, but what we're seeing as well, of course, is great work around things like he for she, where you have male allies in organisations. So, I mean, there's so much going on, isn't there? Positive stuff. And one of the other positives is that diversity within Police Scotland, and actually particularly in the leadership team, not just with yourself, but more broadly. Why is that important, and what's your approach in creating a diverse leadership team?
It's the, as well as the visible diversity is important. You know that phrase, if you can't be it, you can't see it. And that's as relevant in policing as it is. The first time I heard it was in relation to a youth worker when I was working in Durham, and it was about positive role models for teenagers. If you can't be it, you can't. If you can't see it, you can't be it. So, you know, that's both across our communities and us as an organisation. But there's the diversity in terms of visible diversity, and there's the diversity in terms of thought, and they might be one and the same thing. That I think there is a saying around, you know, if everybody around the table's a yes person, you know, then certain people are redundant. And it comes back to that point. We can disagree without being disagreeable. We can challenge, but when we walk out of the door, you know, we're all on the collective same page. I used to work with somebody who was really, really good at giving feedback. And when I started working with him and he line managed me, he'd sort of pull up a chair and say, "I could just give you some feedback, Jo." And it wasn't always positive. And the first time you hear it, you go, "Oh, actually, you know what? That is a great model for any business."
It's sometimes really hard to take feedback. You know, 360 feedback, actually, I find it difficult. But I know it's a really good tool.
But if it becomes commonplace, you know, it would be, you know, I watched you presenting at a particular event. You know, he was a chief and I was a deputy, so it narrows it down. People can work it out. I didn't think you it had the impact could have done, you know, and you're right. You're right. That being just one, that's just been one of many examples. That's either that's a good model of leadership. Can, you know, just going to give you some feedback.
It's that thing about honesty that we talk about, safety, psychological safety.
You're right.
And I think you're right about the cognitive diversity. It's not just about diversity of gender and things like that, but actually how people think, what's their approach is really important. So looking ahead then to the future, what's your vision for Police Scotland?
Absolute priority on the front line of policing in Scotland. And, you know, many people have heard me say this, but frontline being broader than response. Everybody that is dealing directly with the public. So we must put our full weight behind prioritising that area of business and identifying where the pressures exist, some of which we can deal with and some of which, you know, we have to absorb. People have heard me talk about high harm and high threat and prevention and problem solving. We do those two bits well. We put our resource to obviously protect the public in the high harm space. And we're really, really good in relation to that. We put greater value, I think, around the prevention and problem solving and that place-based community policing. And then our challenge is, okay, how do we then deal more efficiently with things that are important to individuals and members of the public, but are the volume that we maybe need to deal with in a different way, so that we create our headspace and our space to tackle high harm and keep operating in the prevention space, often with partners. My fear, and what I would say to the politicians, and have said to the First Minister, policing, do not march policing down to the bottom of the hill as it has been in England and Wales, because what happens is we become a very reactive service. We're just operating in the acute. We lose community policing, we lose connections with local communities, and that being the foundation on which all of our legitimacy with the public, the confidence people have in us, that connection at a local level, that prevention work, that early intervention, talk there about youth work, and it builds from there to the high harm, high-end capabilities, whether it's homicide teams, whether it's working in the serious and organised crime space. It's an ecosystem, and it has to interlink and operate together. So, my challenge is to make sure that we have the funding that we don't move into that space, but also we work more efficiently in the volume space that we can maybe do, through digital means, offering alternatives to people. And then there's the sort of biggies in the contested or contended space. Everybody knows how much time we are spending supporting people in mental health crisis. We absolutely have a role in that space, but we've sort of stepped into it and beyond, haven't we? So it's about handover and speed and speed at which we can do that, and at the same time that prevention space. And then probably the other piece is how we, with partners, get a more agile criminal justice system, and all of the demand that's drawing into us. And then more broadly, 22,000 people. I'd like us to talk more about workforce, the whole of the workforce, not police officer numbers and police staff. I think we'd want to invest in some specialist areas of business, cyber, fraud, digital forensics, and some of those capabilities around vulnerability, especially around, that's cross-border, and that we start to talk about the broader workforce, recognising our colleagues, our police staff colleagues, say that sometimes they don't feel as though they're included. I think there's loads of opportunities for us and to talk more, like I say, about the workforce as opposed to just police officer numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people working in policing who listen to what you said there, I think a lot of what you said, all of that will resonate with them. Mm. And, that frontline focus and that preventative focus. And I think we've still got an opportunity, as you say,
yes,
to not go down
absolutely.
that reactive line.
Yeah.
I think we've got that, but it's how long that window of opportunity lasts, isn't it? So in and amongst all of those things, is there one thing in terms of prioritisation that's right at the forefront for you?
That we're highly trusted and we're high performing. That people look back at us and look back at us and say, I can trust you in my hour of need. Very few people contact the police, don't they, relatively? In my hour of need, I can trust you. And that we know amongst us that we are delivering and performing to the best level we can against the resources that we have.
And it's interesting because trust takes us back to that piece around policing together, trust and confidence. Yeah. And one of the challenges we know in that space is, how do we measure the impact? She talked about that, Timothy, and those measures, and it was really interesting to hear you say that. What's your thoughts? How are we measuring success in that space?
Yeah. So from the public's perspective, combination of if you have dealings with us, what was the quality of our service? That's the trust piece, and then the broader confidence. And we do a lot of survey work in that space. Now, the confidence can be affected not only by what you hear locally, but what you hear nationally and what you hear UK wide and maybe internationally. So that's a broader church. What is the feedback we receive in terms of the quality of the service, both in the way we've responded and then in the manner in which we've supported you, we've helped you, we've dealt with whatever the issues are. And then internally, I'd like to get back to a point where we are doing an annual survey. I think it's 2021 was the last time. I would want us to be surveying the whole workforce every year, so that we create ourselves. I know, are we making progress? Are we making progress? Because without that, we sort of dip in on maybe thematic areas, and that's important. But a cycle of and then we'll respond. We do, what are people saying? Actually, what's our response? What's our response to that? And that's my responsibility to demonstrate to everybody. I've asked you what you think, and I'm listening, and now I'm responding in the following way to that.
And I think that way you get, you talk about thematic data, which obviously drives a lot of insights, what we look at. But I think from the survey piece, you do get, how does it feel for people, as well, which is really important.
And we build in specific questions around, fairness, procedural justice. Do you feel included? Because I think this is well evidenced academically. If you're treated fairly and you've got good leadership and good kit and good support through both colleagues, occupational health, if the offering is a positive one within the organisation, then you will deliver good quality to the public. If you feel that you're not in that space, then you're not going to be able to give 100% to the public. But recognising, we all have personal lives and things ebb and flow, don't they? And I always think of policing, hopefully for everybody, it's a marathon and not a sprint. Yeah. So those things will happen in life. That's whether through different circumstances, but we're here for you. We're here for you, and we'll support you through those difficult times.
Absolutely.
International Women's Day, to celebrate the achievement and value of women and to help forge a better, more inclusive world for women. What advice would you give to aspiring leaders, especially women, who want to make a difference?
First and foremost, a passion for, we're talking policing, aren't we? A passion for policing. A passion for policing. People have said this to me over the years, and we all go, oh no, have a bit of a plan. Have a plan, whatever it is, have a professional plan, have a personal plan. Find the advice and the mentoring and the coaching, and that doesn't have to be a woman. That can be, we talked about allies, haven't we? SWDF allies. Genuinely seek out the feedback, even though at times you might think that doesn't feel, but actually we'd be better for it. And seek every opportunity to challenge yourself. When what do we do in policing? The person, your first or second line manager will sidle up to you and say, I've got a development opportunity for you, which normally means we've got a piece of business that's not performing very well. And sometimes you think, but I like this team. I love this team. I want to stay with this team. No, that's fine. Stay with the team. But if that's what suits somebody as an individual. But in terms of experiencing different things and gaining those broader insights into policing, sometimes you've got to push yourself into areas where you think, oh, this is not going to be easy. This is not going to be easy. Create a network of people that you can call on. Create a network of people. So I have a small network of people who I would call on, who will be really, really honest with me they are the people, in an emergency break glass. What do I do in this situation? I don't call on them very often, but I know that I'll get absolutely both sound advice and really honest advice.
I think it's really important. You mentioned there putting yourself, almost like Brené Brown talks about uncomfortable positions, or that vulnerability, pushing yourself in order to progress. And that doesn't have to be about going up. It could be lateral development. Yeah. You have to put yourself in that position of vulnerability. But great advice.
And also seeking my husband is my greatest critic, and he can be brutal at times. So whether it's something in the media or an interview, or I say, well, I think he's a retired police officer. That's not to say that's the only person you can take advice from, but harshest critic. And we've all got those, whether they're friends or family networks, but they're important. They're important because they keep you on track, don't they? And have your best interest at heart as well.
It's coming from that place of love.
Yeah.
So it's been fascinating, Chief, to hear your vision for the future. It's about our communities, really at heart, and that's something that's really important to me as a police officer. And we know in the diversity and inclusion with Policing Together, there's a huge organisational effort in this space. It really, the future does look bright for us. Today, on International Women's Day, there's a call to action. And so my question is to you: how can we accelerate women's equality in policing?
The power of those one-to-one conversations. Our collective responsibility to identify, seek out people with potential, and engage in those conversations around. I've seen you, I've heard about you, I hear really positive things. Actually, how can we support each other to the maximum effect? Lots of research, isn't there, around imposter theory, and that little voice that says, "Oh, can I?" So maybe some of the interactions that we have, just push people, guide them beyond the bit where the voice in their head saying, "Oh, I don't think I can. I'll probably wait another year before I apply to be a detective or firearms officer or become a sergeant." And our obligation to identify individuals, and I think just give them a bit of a nudge and say, come on, you've got to back yourself. That's the starting point. You've got to back yourself.
Sometimes that's the hardest thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely, because the little voice says, but I've only been doing X, or I don't think it says I've on this criteria. But our collective obligation to support our colleagues and guide them. Because I could take back to, without the sergeants, the really good sergeants, that set me. I was very fortunate. That set me on a really positive path through policing. And that was the early 90s. So, we can all think of the examples of poor experiences and poor practice, but many occasions, let's shift to fabulous organisations.
Yeah, and there's that old saying, you join an organisation, but you leave a leader. And if you have a bad leader, that can really be the make or break situation for many.
Yeah, absolutely. And having invested in people to bring them in, we want them to stay, don't we? And we want them to flourish.
I think it's an excellent point you make, though, about those good examples. And I think in the conversation, it can often go into the negatives and what hasn't worked well, and particularly with our male colleagues.
Yeah.
But actually, there are so many fantastic examples. I think that's a really important message as well.
Well, Chief Constable Farrell, thank you for speaking with us today and being able to inspire inclusion, which is, of course, this year's International Women's Day theme for 2024. To our listeners, let's take today's conversation as a call to action. Reflect on the importance of diversity and inclusion in leadership. in our communities, seek out resources that support and promote women in leadership roles and every day. Because together we can inspire inclusion, not just on International Women's Day, but every day. It's worth remembering that as the United Nations lays out so eloquently, that investing in women is a human rights imperative and a cornerstone for building inclusive societies. Progress for women benefits us all.
Chief, your insights today have been incredibly inspiring. Thank you for sharing your journey and for your commitment to fostering an increasingly inclusive environment in Police Scotland. Thank you for tuning in to Breaking Barriers. Join us next time as we continue to share stories that challenge the status quo and inspire change.
This has been a Twa Bold Lassies production for the Scottish Women's Development Forum.